Good morning, everyone. I'm Luc Vanderveken, Managing Director at Impakt. Very warm welcome. It's a lovely day. I hope everybody is getting some sun, some spring sun today. But we're not going to talk about the weather today. We're going to discuss the new endpoint security capabilities of Intel Security. Special guest today is Dave Broeckx, an Intel Security specialist, who will present those new capabilities. We have quite some people online, so we use a system that if you have questions, you can use the chat to post those questions. We'll try to look at those, and I assume we try to answer those most as possible at the end of the presentation. So Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Luc. So, hi everyone, my name is indeed Dave Broeckx and I'm working for the Intel Security, I have to say now, not McAfee anymore, but I most likely will say this a lot of times. I'm responsible for channel enablement, so I assist partners in the whole region, in my region, Northern Eastern Europe, to get known about the latest technologies we have to offer. And today I want to talk about the release we did a few months ago regarding Endpoint 10, but also regarding some new endpoint technologies that we have in place, which all combine together to our new endpoint strategy. So, first of all, I want to talk also a little bit about our challenges that we see, and as you can imagine, there is only one way that the detection of new malware is going, and that's up. Every day we see more and more new malware. The speed of seeing more new malware is also still increasing. But what's more important in terms of seeing the bad things in the wild is that we see that the new types of malware become more and more targeted to organizations. We saw this behavior already for a year. Maybe already a bit longer, but now we really see a lot more spikes. To give you an example, in the past, you all know ransomware like CryptoLocker and everything. In the past, we saw those types of ransomware open to the whole public, so that the more they could infect, the more money the hackers could make. But we now see this shifting a bit. We now see targeted ransomware campaigns to one company, for example. So that they really want to get a lot more money from that one single company than having, let's say 500 individuals, home users that just spend a few hundreds of dollars to get their files back. And now they target companies where they ask them to send like $20,000-$30,000 before they can decrypt their files again. Also bound to this is that we don't only see that the amount of malware and the complexity of malware is changing and becoming more difficult to fight, but we also see that when a malware has entered the organization and did some harm, that the costs of those breaches can pile up really fast. To give you an example, like we had last year, we had Target, a big American multinational kind of supermarket chain that was hit, and in one weekend they stole a few millions of credit card numbers by hacking their point of sale systems. But we also see this more locally with some certain organizations. And what's also more interesting or more, how can I say, more difficult is that the amount of time that takes place before these attacks are detected takes a long time. This is an average is 256 days. It's quite a long time before a customer realized that they have indeed, that they were under attack and that things were happening in their organization. Now, if we bring this to the current situation that we see with more or less all customers, is that we see three different phases. We see on the left, it's the time to compromise, and that's what we also call the protect phase, because in that phase we try to always invest in new technologies and we try to put technology in place to make sure that our protection is better. But once this has passed, then we come into different phases, which we call the time to discover and the time to recover, or the detect phase and correct phase, where we indeed see a totally different story. Because as most of the customers are investing in traditional endpoint technologies and other security technologies, we always try to put our money in the first phase, where we try to make sure that we can keep the hackers out. But at one time, if a hacker gets in And it's not always a question if that will happen, it's more a question when this will happen. We also have to think about, what can we do next? How can we indeed make sure that we detect it as fast as possible and also that we can solve it? If we combine this with efforts and with the security teams or the operational teams that have to manage all the different security technologies, we all know that with the drop of IT budget, with the drop of skilled IT personnel, because it's very hard to find very good security engineers in the market, that this can really lead to a big impact on organization, especially in financial loss. Now, where we as an organization with our strategy would like to go to, and this is not something that we can do over a day, is that we really want to make sure that we can expand this time to compromise or the protect phase, but together that by expanding this protection phase that we also have solutions in place where we can fast discover that something happened, and also where we have the option to run recovery tools so that we can indeed, if a hacker penetrates the organization, it launches this malware, it launches these attacks, and something is happening, that we can fast identify that something took place and that we also can take action to get rid of it. Of course, this goes hand in hand in a full operational flow. We cannot do this all with different technologies or with different software packages that need to be maintained by different teams, by different organizations. No, what we try to do, and that's also why Intel has acquired us a few years ago, is that we try to make an open standard to the market where not only we, with our McAfee security solutions, but we're also third-party vendors, like for example, we just announced that we have an integration now with Checkpoint, but we also have a lot of other vendors already integrated, that we all can work together and make sure that we can lower your operational costs by automating a lot of those things for you, so that even when something happens in your organization, that the systems behind this can already detect and also correct it where needed. And I will come back to that a little bit later in the presentation. Now, this endpoint strategy all comes down in our new full-blown strategy that we try to put into the market, so that we are putting in the market, where we say that the protect, detect, and correct phase are all three equally important. And where customers mainly invested a lot in the protection phase, we also now need to make sure that customers realize that if something bad happens, that we also need to make sure that we can easily detect and correct. Now, of course, this is not something which you can put in place one time and just forget that you have put it in place by just installing some solutions. No. This really needs to make sure that it also has an adapt phase where if something happens in your organization, that we learn from it and that we can fine-tune the protect solutions, but also the detect and correct solutions, so that we indeed make sure that our organization and the security tools linked to that are continuously evolving. And that's also something that we see is a key requirement for new endpoint technologies. If we now go to our endpoint strategy, then our endpoint strategy is divided in certain building blocks, where the first one, where we most of the time will discuss today, is about our Endpoint Security 10. It's our latest endpoint solution that we have into place, which really is the basic solution on endpoints that a customer would need. In the past, we had some different solutions, like we had a Virus Scan Enterprise, and a lot of you as a customer are still using this. We had our HIP solution, we have Site Advisor. Those three technologies we now included in one package, which is called our Endpoint Security 10. Next to that, we also have two other solutions which form a kind of strong field versus the endpoint malware that we are seeing, and these are indeed regarding threat intelligence, and I will talk about a little bit later in the presentation, and about endpoint detection and response, or our active response solution. These are solutions that also will not only work in the protection phase, but also a lot in the correction and detection phase, which is of course equally important. We also can then link this more to advanced malware detection by introducing our sandboxing technology. And of course, what's also very important is all of these are managed through EPO. I'm going to leave out web protection for now, but just keep in mind that we also have web protection solutions in place which can have full integration with our endpoint technology. So let's kick off with the basic endpoint protection. So I think we have evolved over the last few years in such a way that we all know that traditional antivirus on a client is not sufficient anymore. Because antivirus is a blacklisting technology, so either it's in this blacklist or it's not in this blacklist. What we have never done before is that we included all our endpoint technologies in one client and deployed this to the host. And the reason why is because we want to always give the flexibility to the end user to select which technologies he would like to use, but also to keep the footprint as low as possible. We have some competitors which always deploy a large set of files to a desktop, for example, to a server, but only then using like 10 or 15%. But still leaving a big footprint on the machines, and that's something we always try to avoid. Now, for us, the basics is not antivirus on itself anymore, because that's not sufficient. So our basics, what we always have said in the last few years, is that you need an antivirus client, but you also need to have a kind of desktop firewall, and you need to do something about web protection. Why web protection? Most malware comes into your network now through web. It's like in the past we always got a lot of malware attacks to email via attachments, but most of the end users are now known to not click every single attachment which comes into email. So the hackers moved along to a different vector and they chose web as their preferred one, and that's also why we need to be quite strict on what kind of web traffic we are allowing and what we can do with web. Of course, for us it's still very important to keep this all in one single platform. So we want to make sure that we can manage it also through EPO, so that you can have the same look and feel for every client, even when this client is on-premise, but also when, for example, your client is in Amazon, because we have what we call cloud connectors. And for us, it does not really matter if the customers or the client machines are in your own data center, or they are locally on site, or they are in the cloud. We don't care. At the end, we manage all of them at the same in the same way as if it was a hardware machine which is on your desktop. Now the third component here, and that's a very important one, we had to be open, and this is also coming from Intel. We created something what we called data exchange layer, and I will come to that a bit later on as well, where we created an open industry standard where different security solutions can connect to each other. And this is now also what we have seen with the announcement of Checkpoint and Intel Security going to work together, is by you leveraging this DXL component so that we can do something with their information and they can do something with our information. What also is important is that if we are combining technologies, like for example what we are now going to do with virus scan, desktop firewall and web filtering, is that we also have the opportunity to provide a lot more actionable data. What do I mean with actionable data? If you see log information, for example, you can read a lot more detail than you could ever do before, because in the past all the technologies were working separate from each other, and the only thing you saw on your antivirus client was that there was a malware infection. Now we can go a lot more in depth, and I will show you this later on. So what is this Endpoint 10 client now? Endpoint 10 client is a modular approach of our anti-malware solution, and modular in that sense that we have three basic modules, which is the threat prevention module, the firewall module, and the web control module. And you can see that the threat prevention module has some descriptions like you have in Virus Scan Enterprise. So we have an on-access scanner, on-demand scanner, exploit prevention, and access protection. The firewall module is the same as the HIPS firewall, and the web control module is based on the Site Advisor Enterprise. So those three modules are for us the minimal. This is really the basics of technologies that you would need on an endpoint to try to fight malware. Optional, we also have a fourth module already, which is the TIE, or the Threat Intelligence Exchange model, and I will discuss that a bit later on what this is going to do. Now, of course, very important, everything is still managed by EPO. Why have we now recreated this new technology? Because at the end, it's not just that we took parts of Virus Scan Enterprise, the HIPS firewall, and Site Advisor. No, we created it completely from scratch. And we have been using it now for more than a year and a half in the consumer market. So the consumers are always our testing pool to test new technologies. And now with the version 10.1, we finally announced it in the enterprise market so that we can also manage it through EPO, do migrations, and etc. Now, what are our strong points here? First of all, we always think a lot about our footprint. So our footprint is still very low. And also based with this new technology, we were also able to shrink the DAT size with more or less 60%. So this means that the DAT size, which originally was around 100 megabytes, is now around 40 megabytes. Also, we have not only done tests versus competitors, we also have done tests versus our own technology, and we can see that we now have 47% more CPU power, and that it's 16% faster than our old technology. And the reason why is because we have done a lot of integrations in the core systems, which I will discuss also in a few minutes. The good thing what we also have done is that now this Endpoint 10 client is a uniform client for all our technologies in terms with endpoints. And this, what I mean with that is that we do not only have this Endpoint 10 client now in the enterprise market, we also have that in the consumer market, and we also have this in our SaaS or software as a service market. So the endpoint technology is uniform, which also provides us that we can a lot easier create new modules because we only have to maintain one major version instead of having 3 versions like we had in the past. So the reason why this new Endpoint 10 client is so much more performant is more or less based on the section at the bottom where you can see the common components and the kernel mode drivers. So in the past with VirusScan Enterprise, HIPS, Site Advisor, they all had some own components which are exactly the same in the 3 different solutions. So what we have done with the Endpoint 10 solution is that we combine those solutions together so that these are now common and shared across all the modules. Which means, for example, we had alerting, we had the password protection, we had the connection to GTI. All those connectivity things or all those modules were tripled installed on your system. Why? Because every single piece of software that we deployed on your machine had use of this information. So with Endpoint 10, this is now all common and shared, which allows us to have a lot less code that we need to install, so the footprint becomes smaller and it also becomes more performant. Now, if you see just above the common components layer, you see the modules. So we have the threat prevention module, which is comparable with the VirusScan Enterprise, firewall with the HIPS firewall, web control with the Site Advisor Enterprise. TIE is an optional module, and now we also have the option now to include future modules. We just had with our company a sales kickoff, and there we already got a glimpse on the future, and there are coming more or less between 5 and 10 new modules that will be plugged into Endpoint 10. One of them is active response, which is also part of the presentation, but we will also add some more modules from summertime and further into the year. At the top, we have the security management, where we have the connectivity to the EPO, so by using the EPO agent. We have the client UI, of course, and then we also have the opportunity to connect to the cloud connectors, like, for example, Amazon, so that we can also present the same look and feel with the client on Amazon clients. How does it look like? This is an example or screenshot of an event log. And as you can see more in detail, is that's what I also meant with having information more actionable. We don't see just a basic message anymore that a piece of malware was found. What we now can see is indeed the user who ran a certain file, and this file tried to stop, for example, certain components of our endpoint. So the log information becomes also a lot more useful to use as an administrator. You don't need to take a few different logs, correlate them, and try to see what's going on. No, we can now present it straight away from our Endpoint 10, so it's a lot more actionable for you as an admin to see what's going on in your environment. Of course, this log information is not only available on the endpoint itself, but it's also available in EPO. When you install, you can see that the user interface is a lot more friendly as well. It's if you see the old components like VirusScan Enterprise and HIPS and Site Advisor, it's a bit outdated in terms of look and feel. So what we have introduced now is the same client for all endpoint solutions. So this means that every endpoint user, either in the consumer market, in the enterprise market, or in the SaaS market, will see the same look and feel. Now at the top you see the 3 basic modules, which are all enabled, and you have the option to manually disable it, or to EPO, of course. Or we can, even when you see the small section below, you can also choose to not show those modules in the client. So all those modules, even when it's one client, are optionally to be deployed. So you can choose, I want to deploy only threat prevention to all my machines, or I want to deploy all 3, or just 2, or a combination. That's your choice. We provide you in EPO the opportunity to just create a deployment task where you can say, I want to deploy everything, or I want to deploy a subset of it. So that's also the flexibility we have to offer straight away out of the box. This is something I already mentioned briefly. So we took a lot of deduplication code, we took it out of the clients and we eliminated so that we really could have a very strong basic, which is in the core modules, so that with the additional modules we can add, let's say like active response, we don't need to think about how the connectivity to GTI is going, how is the password protection layer going. All those things we don't need to worry anymore. So this also means that our modules that we can plug in are also becoming smaller and easier to maintain from us for new features and functionality that we can add in the future. Also important is that we can run the same endpoint 10 client in multiple ways. So on the right, you can run it standalone. So if you want to install it at home, for example, you can just install it and it will be a standalone version. And we can run it in a managed version. So we have 2 levels here. We have the most common level is the EPO on-premise, where you have your own EPO server and you just deploy and manage it from your EPO system. We also have what we call EPO clouds, and this is our managed services offering, where we can deploy your clients from our cloud environment. Or something in between, some partners also have the option to have their own EPO managed service, and then they can also run it from their managed services, of course. What else did we improve in this endpoint 10 client? And this was a comment which we received quite a lot from the clients and the users, is that when we are running an on-demand scan on the system, suddenly the system gets a big impact in terms of performance. And when you reboot the system, for example, the on-demand scan had to start all over again. Those 2 items we solved in endpoint 10. So first of all, we will monitor the system all the time to see how idle it is. If it's idle enough, then we will start running the scan. If then a user starts working on his laptop or on his machine again, then we see that the idle status has changed and we will stop scanning. If you reboot the system, no problem, the scan will continue where it stopped last time. So this really helps to make sure that we can indeed run on-demand scans, because these are still important to run, but that we can really run them in such a way that your end user is not affected by that scan. Of course, all the other scans, like are also still available, where we can do the minimal scan and etc. These are also available in the endpoint 10 client. So what if you are a customer which is using those 3 different technologies and you decide to move to endpoint 10? We also, of course, provide you some tools to do this. It's not that you have to uninstall everything and then install everything from scratch and configure everything from scratch. No, not at all. What we have to offer today is what we call our migration tool. It's only available since version 10.1, so that's the latest version, where we have 2 options. We can either do an automatic migration or a manual migration. I always prefer manual migration because this keeps me under control of the system. And of course, this also gives you a perfect opportunity to delete older policies which were not in use anymore and to fine-tune your policies again to the new systems. Now, this is not only for the ThreatScape Enterprise, but also for the desktop firewall and also for Site Advisor. For the 3 components that we have migrated in Endpoint 10, you have an endpoint migration assistance. It's a different package that you need to check in EPO. And once you have checked it in, you can just run it and you can then decide which policies you would like to migrate and which you would like to leave behind, or which ones you would like to delete. That's in a nutshell what we do with Endpoint 10. So to recap, with our Endpoint 10, we have combined the strength of our ThreatScape Enterprise, our HIPS firewall, and our Site Advisor in one modular client, where we also changed the whole basis of the endpoint client to make sure that we use modular components and that we have the option to add modules in the future, and those modules are already on the roadmap for the rest of the year. Now, this is the first, or the basics in endpoint security. Now, the next thing that I would like to briefly discuss is about threat intelligence. So let's say we find a piece of, or we download a file, and this file, we don't have any blacklisting, we don't have any reputation from web, we don't know what it is. So in that sense, we need to do something with it. And this is also our vision to our competitors and with Intel to the security market, is that we should find a way that our security products can work together, not only within our own set of products, but also with our competitors. And that's why we indeed create the data exchange layer. Also, what's more important is that if we have multiple security solutions connecting to each other, we need to make sure that they can learn from each other, so that if it's vendor A or vendor B, doesn't really matter. If vendor A can share information which helps vendor B to take a better decision, that's where we would like to go to. And by doing this collaboration between different vendors over an open standard, we also make sure that the solutions only become better and stronger over time. So how is this working? So first of all, we have our open connected ecosystem, and this is what we call our data exchange layer. So the data exchange layer is a uniform communication bus created originally together by Intel and McAfee before we were acquired, but we now released it. We only released it when we were already part of Intel. And this communication bus will help us to share information. And information can be, for example, reputation of files, reputation of IP addresses, and etc. Once we have this data exchange layer in place, and this is something you need to install and to deploy in your environment, because this will also help you to have one-to-one connections between your clients and an EPO server or with the data exchange server. And the reason why we have to do this is because now, if we want to react in a fast way, think again about the protect phase. Then we have the detect phase and the correct phase. If something happens in your organization, you want to make sure that you can take an action in a few seconds and not in a few hours. You want to, if something bad is happening, that you want to be able to interact straight away. And that's why we need that data exchange layer, because we create persistent connections between the host and the DXL broker, like we call it, or the DXL server, so that we always have a connectivity with the clients. The first solution we created, which is making use of this data exchange layer, is called Threat Intelligence Exchange, or TIE. And this TIE is a solution where we are validating reputation of files that are executed. What do I mean with that? So we are downloading that same file from the internet. So it's bypassing our endpoint 10 because we have never seen it before. So we have no blacklisting information. It's coming from a URL which has no bad reputation, so we are allowed to download it. And it's not making any special connectivity, so our desktop file says it's okay for me. So once we run this file, we will take real-time a reputation of a hash of this file and ask a local server, which is called the TIE server, have you seen this file before in the organization, yes or no? And if yes, what's the reputation? Let's say never before. Then we can also query GTI to get a reputation of the file. Once we know that the reputation is bad, or based on a policy you can define, if you say the reputation is unknown, we can decide to block this execution on the endpoint. And I will show it to you in a graph that it makes a bit more sense. So we have in the middle we have the data exchange layer. and then we have a McAfee TIE server, and we have a TIE endpoint client. So on this endpoint, we have endpoint 10 installed and TIE client. So the client will execute a file, or try to execute a file, I have to say. And what happens in the meantime is that this hash file is being sent to the TIE server. The TIE server says, I have never seen this before, because he showed a question mark, so it's unknown. GTI also says, I have never seen this file before, it's unknown. So we bring it back to the TIE client. At that time, you as an administrator decide within the policy whether you want to allow this file to run, because the reputation is unknown, or if you would like to block it. We can also distill a bit more information. We can see what's the file age, was it signed by a certificate which is revoked, an untrusted process. In this case, we decide to not allow the file to run. That's what TIE can do. So TIE can help you to make sure that certain files, let's say malware files, which we have never seen before, like targeted malware files, that we take the hash of it, we ask for a reputation, and if the reputation, for example, is unknown, we can then decide on the TIE client to not execute that file. So an example, let's say a brand new ransomware file is being sent in your organization. A user tries to click that ransomware file. The TIE will take the hash of that ransomware file, ask the TIE server, have you ever seen it before? No. The TIE server will ask GTI, have you ever seen it before? No. And then we can decide based on the policy if we would like to allow it or not. A typical one in a very secure environment is if the reputation is unknown, we will not execute that file, so the ransomware cannot be executed. Now, I want to bring this story one step further, because it's all nice to see if a reputation is unknown that we can block the files, but maybe some files are downloaded which had no reputation or an unknown reputation, but they are good. So we need to make sure that we can check those files, and preferably not in a manual way. So then we introduce the next solution in place, which is our sandbox. And what's a sandbox? A sandbox is it's an appliance, and on that appliance we run virtual machines. And in those virtual machines, we run those unknown files, and we validate if they are trying to do something bad, yes or no. What can we validate? Anything. We can validate what it's trying to do. That's what we call with dynamic analysis. So we can ask them to run in that virtual machine, and we will monitor what's going on. Or we can also unpack the code and bring it to assembly code, so that we really can see in the full source code of the file what it's trying to do. Based on all that information, we can then decide. We can say it's malware, it's a Trojan horse, or it's safe. And of course, that information, we can bring this back to our TIE reputation server so that the reputations are known. Now, how do they fit together? So the TIE client, if a file has a reputation of unknown, can be sent to an ATD box, to our sandboxing solution. In this sandbox solution, we will we will analyze that file. We will see what this file is doing, what it's trying to do. Maybe it has some techniques to avoid sandboxing, but by going to the assembly code, we can still see what that malware is doing. And then we can what we call distill IOCs, or indicators of compromise. What's an IOC? It's just a reference of what that piece of malware is trying to do. It tries to create a registry, for example. It's trying to start a process. It's trying to hook itself via rootkits in a known process. Those are all what we call indicators of compromise. Based on that information, we can now say to TIE, hey, this file was really bad. Update your reputation database so that you know for the next time if somebody tries to execute that file, that we will not allow it. In a graph, so we have executed a file on a TIE client, and the TIE server says the file is unknown. The next thing what will happen is that this file is being sent to our sandboxing solution, and the sandbox solution decides, this file is really bad, this is not good, we have to do something about it. The next thing that will happen is that the sandbox will contact the TIE server again and says, look, this file was really bad, this hash, update your reputation database. And as a final result, what the TIE server will do over DXL, it will publish this reputation change to all connected TIE components. And as you can see, we have already all our technology linked to TIE, not only endpoint technology, but also our networking technology. And we are going to do this with some of our competitors in the future as well, so that they can also benefit from this reputation change. So the whole endpoint 10, TIE, and ATD are still quite a lot in the protection phase, not in the detect and correct phase. Because these are the new protection solutions where we need to step up the game again to make sure that we can also identify files which we have never seen before. Now let's go to the situation that a file has entered your organization, it was executed, was not stopped because maybe you didn't have those technologies in place, or maybe somebody bypassed it by using USB key and run it on the system itself, for example. What if your environment has been penetrated and something bad is happening? And that's when we are jumping into the detect and correct phase. And this is our first solution in that space. And this is what we call McAfee Active Response. So what is McAfee Active Response? Briefly, because this is a quite big solution. What we do with McAfee Active Response is we keep what we call collectors on the clients. And what are collectors? Collectors are data sets. For example, we keep by default all file operations on a machine. Every time when a file is created, a file is modified, or a file is deleted, we keep that entry in a local database on the client machine. And this local database is by default 60 megabyte, I think, but you can control this through EPL. We also do this for network flows, we do this for process information, or you can do it for every kind of collector you can imagine, because at the end it's based on scripts and you can create your own scripts to do so. Based on these data collectors, we can search. So we can ask, for example, give me all machines where this piece of malware has been seen. We can do this on FileName, we can do this on hash, we can do this on a lot of different options. Now, by doing this, we know exactly which machines have this file present on their system, even when it was not executed. And that's strong, because most of the technology only comes into place when you try to execute it, when you try an on-access scanning, and etc. But quite often, when the on-access scanner says it's good, because it has no blacklist entry, the file can reside on your system for weeks, months, years even, until you do an on-demand scan, and then the file is detected. Now, with Active Response, because it's also linked to data exchange layer, we can look into those systems by asking questions in milliseconds and seconds. So other examples would be, give me all systems where we have Adobe Reader version 9 installed. Or give me all systems where we see network activity going to a DNS server on the internet instead of an internal DNS server. All this information can be retrieved through Active Response. Now, it's not only a solution which will give you information, you can also do reactions. And now we come in our correct phase. Because with the detect phase, we can ask all those questions, we can also automate a lot of things, but with reactions, we also can create actions that we can run on the client. For example, if we see this malware file with this specific hash being present on a system, automatically delete it. Or we can even continue. If we see a ransomware being triggered somewhere and we see that certain files are being changed to a different extension, you know that with a lot of ransomware samples this is happening, shut down the machine so that it cannot further encrypt the machine. Because you know, once a ransomware sample has been triggered and it's running, you cannot stop it. You can delete it, but the files are still encrypted. What else can we do? We can also say we want to uninstall on all systems Adobe Reader version 9 because it contains vulnerabilities. So this is what we can do with Active Response. So Active Response is, like we call it internally, our hunter solution. It will hunt the environment looking for IOCs. Those IOCs you specify by creating your search queries, and then you can automate it by using the reactions, and these reactions can also be started in an automated way. So if a condition appears, it will automatically delete the file, shut down the machine, start an on-demand scan, enter a different firewall rule. So the reason why we have so many options here is because everything is bound to scripts. And scripts based on operating scripts, Visual Basic scripts, Python scripts, so both for Windows and Linux systems. Now, I can talk a lot about active response, but I have to guard my time a bit as well. Active response is, at the end, the real thing you need to remember about active response is that this is really focusing only on the detect and correct phase and not on the protect. So active response is not a protection solution. No, it's a solution which will provide you a lot more operational influence in your environment by having a lot of automated things happening, so that if something bad happens, that it will automatically clean it for you, that it will delete the files, make sure it will not happen again. If you want to know more about active response, I would suggest you take contact with Impakt, and that we can set up a further session if needed, of course. I just want to give you a bit of a full-blown situation that when we use active response, TIE, and ATD. And this is, let's say, we try to download a file through a web gateway. The first one was blocked. The second one, we have no idea. As you can see, our web gateway has also an integration with TIE. So also our web gateway can ask for TIE reputation straight away from the TIE server. Now, in this case, the file is unknown. So this means we download the file from the internet. The endpoint 10 client has not done anything with it because it's still on the web gateway client, but we were able to send the reputation or send the hash file to the reputation server, to the TIE server, but we have no reputation. So now we can do a lot of actions, and the action we are going to take in this example is that we are going to take that file and we are going to send it to the client. We're going to give him the doubt of the trusts, but we also send it straight away to ATD. So on ATD, we decide that this file is malicious, and now we get the same process as in the previous slides. We update the reputation database, so the reputation has been updated, and straight away we provide protection to every client, every server, every gateway which is linked to TIE, because the next time now a client tries to download this file or tries to execute this file, the TIE client will automatically block it, because the reputation is bad. Now, we still need to do one more thing, and that's where active response needs to come in place. We now know all IOCs, so we can also hunt the environment by active response to all the clients, and we can find files which were never executed, just saved on disk, for example, and we can also, by creating a reaction, clean that system so that we are good in a clean shape again, and then we can do this again for the next malware and the next malware, etc. Now, this process, what you have seen on this slide, can be fully automated. And it all depends on you as an administrator, how far you would like to take this automation. How much control do you want to still keep? For example, with active response, I can imagine that a lot of administrators say it's very powerful, but we want to keep under control. And that's possible. The choice of automating it is all yours, to be honest. And then I also want to end with one marketing slide a bit. So it's also important for most of you as a customer, because a lot of decisions are made based on the Gartner Leader Quadrant, and I think we are still there for the 13th time in a row now. And we got a lot of feedback, especially now regarding our endpoint 10, that it's indeed well accepted in the market, as well accepted by Gartner, so that it's really proven to be a base solution for your endpoint technologies. But that we also have the vision and the technologies already in place to also widen the endpoint strategy and organization by introducing our Threat Intelligence Exchange to have full control over what file are we going to allow to execute, and by introducing active response, which also gives you an operational tool which kicks in when something bad happens and that you would like to make sure that it's not visible or available, that it's not present anymore in your environment. And that's it. Questions?
Okay, thank you, Dave. I've seen 2 questions by now. I'm not sure if you see the chat also, Dave, or should I just read them?
Okay, will VirusScan Enterprise 8.8 have an end of life soon? I'm not aware of that yet. I don't think so for now, because we still have a lot of enterprise customers running VirusScan 8 a version of VirusScan 8.8. So I don't expect this to be happening soon, to be honest. But I don't know. I have not seen it myself. Is active response integrated with McAfee SIEM? That's a very good question, by the way. Yes, not now, but it will come in the next release. So an action would be in our SIEM solution is if something bad is happening, that we can automatically create an active response search in the environment, and bound to that active response search, we can then create reactions. So yes, that's going to come in the next release of SIEM. I see people typing. The magic quadrant shows Trend Micro have a more complete vision. Is the gap between Intel and Trend Micro covered by the roadmap? Yes, it is. I think one of the things what we were lacking quite a lot is everything that has to do with behavioral-based scanning, and that's where Trend Micro is quite strong. And in the summer period, we will going to launch additional modules for our Endpoint 10 that will present this behavioral-based scanning. And what do I mean with behavioral-based scanning? That instead of scanning based on signatures, that we're going to scan really based on behavior. So by doing scans based on behavior, this will also give us an additional way to, for example, detect ransomware a lot better than we do with signatures. No, that's not completely the same. So the question is, wasn't behavioral-based scanning included in HIPS? We have a basic set of behavioral scanning in HIPS. That's true, but it's more in the exploit module where we are going to scan based on certain buffer overflows, where we're going to scan on certain exploits that we try to run. What I mean with the behavioral-based scanning engine that will come to Endpoint 10 is that we are not going to only look for exploits or for buffer overflows, but that we really are going to see, for example, let's take the example of a ransomware. If the files are suddenly being encrypted, that we also can trigger that as a bad behavior. So this is not the same thing like doing a buffer overflow or doing an exploit prevention. It goes a little bit further than, no, it goes not a little bit, it goes quite a lot further than what we can offer today within HIPS. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dave, for this interesting presentation. For everyone, we'll make this presentation available online. We saw that question also pop up before. Everyone who registered will receive an email with the details on where to get it. So otherwise, if you have further questions, feel free to contact us. Impakt is a platinum partner of Intel Security, so we have several certified consultants in-house with a lot of experience in different environments. So I'm sure we can help you to maintain and optimize your endpoint security. Regarding the new technology, we can help you also with proof of concepts or the upgrades or migrations. We offer as well health checks and expert service contracts. So with those kind of services, we look into your specific environment, advice on what to do and how to help, and can help you, of course, with the implementation. With the new version, we're also planning new trainings. We launched a poll at the beginning of the webinar. So currently we are looking into 3 options. A new one is to organize a short training online via a webinar. Would be kind of half a day to make it easier or practical, not to go somewhere else and do it from the office or from home. The second option will be a one-day training only for the new features. And the third option will be indeed the regular 2-day training where we combine EPO with the new Endpoint Security 10. So we're still looking into that, but we'll keep you informed on what kind of training we will make available. If you have further suggestions on that topic, so please feel free to contact us. So yeah, that's it for today. Thank you, Dave, again, and thank you all for attending. Have a very nice day.